The Spin-off Podcast Network.
K-pop to me means more than just listening to music. It's learning to be myself.
The Spin-off's new documentary, K-Pollies, follows 3 Pacific youth obsessed with K-pop. In a one-off documentary, see what they've found in Korean pop culture and how they bridge it with their own.
When you start dressing, looking different, everyone side-eyes you. But in K-pop, they're just like, no, like celebrate yourself.
Watch K-Pollies today at thespinoff.co.nz/videos. Made with the support of New Zealand On Air. You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is brought to you by Spark Lab, offering inspiration and practical advice to help businesses find their edge. To hear more about Spark Lab, including details about the latest events, workshops and business tools, visit sparklab.co.nz. And now, here's your host, Simon Pound.
You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is made by The Spin-off with help from Callaghan Innovation, New Zealand's innovation agency. Here's your host, Simon Pound.
Co-working spaces can be great little communities. There's something exciting and energising about being around people making interesting things happen. Always new people with exciting news, connections you can make, and a lot of people working on a global level. They're also little bubbles and can help you forget that life isn't like that everywhere. In fact, even having co-working spaces available isn't all that common, even within your own city. One person who saw the power of community and worked to make a space happen for South Auckland is Manawa Udy. Last year, she spearheaded the crowdfunding and then establishment of Ngahere Communities that runs Te Haa or Manukau, a co-working space and intentional community for the creative, innovative, entrepreneurial people of South Auckland to help tap that vast potential. Te Haa o Manukau is a project from the Southern Initiative, supported by ATEED through Grid AKL, and is built to be a thriving heart and link to the wider innovative business space. Manawa has a background of pioneering community entrepreneurship projects such as a buy one, give one model driving school and forming the Peter Collective, a community of community providers to better serve the people around Mount Roskill. And as a creative director at Bob & Bob, Manawa tells these stories and others day in, day out. To chat entrepreneurship and community, Manawa joins us now. Kia ora, thank you very much for being here.
Kia ora, Simon. Thanks for having me.
Hey, so tell me, how did you come to be involved with all of these community entrepreneurship projects? Because you first studied in photography, hey?
Yeah. I mean, it was never really intentional, but I suppose coming from photography, that was my first kind of touch with entrepreneurship. I studied photography. I grew up in Rotorua, moved to Palmerston North, studied photography down there, and really got into the commercial side of photography, and then moved to Auckland to kind of pursue that career. But pretty quickly realised that the passion I had for photography didn't come through in the commercial sense. So when I started trying to commercialise my skill in photography, I realised that I didn't actually like it. I liked it as a hobby. But that was kind of my first touch with entrepreneurship. I ended up moving into, over time, like I did a whole bunch of youth leading, youth mentoring and stuff like that, working in kind of youth development. And then I ended up in a role with Auckland Council where I was working at a brand new youth centre called Roskill Youth Zone. And it was probably in that time where I started to see, I guess, some of the very real needs that a lot of the young people in some of our tougher communities have. You know, like you have kids that are hanging out every day after school and all throughout the weekend, and you can see so much that they don't have. But I guess for me, I always choose to see what people do have. And entrepreneurship for me is kind of like taking what you do have and turning it into what you need. And while I was at Roskill Youth Zone, we started to do that with the young people. And it kind of looked like things like showing the kids how they could use a lawnmower to make $50 to spend in the school holidays, or how to make some cookies and package them really nicely and sell them off as Christmas gifts so that they had some cash for their own Christmas. And it started off in little things like that and just continued to grow. And we ended up setting up, along with an awesome team of kind of young adults, we set up a cafe in the youth centre called Roskell Coffee Project, which ran for a couple of years, which was a really awesome cafe that also had a youth training element within it. We set up a screen printing kind of area, which turned into a screen printing business for one of the local young guys. And we set up, like, with the gym area that we had, we started to get young people to do personal training sessions. So we were always looking for ways for young people to kind of use what we had and the skills that they had to turn it into things that they needed. And that was kind of the start for me, and it just kept growing from there.
Are those easy things to do in a sector that you know, like, people often just have like lines in their head like community work is just community, there's nothing commercial, and, you know, entrepreneurship's just entrepreneurship? Is it easy to be blending things like that?
Nah, it's not. I don't think it is. Even now, it's a constant challenge, because you don't only have the challenge of commercialising something, you have the challenge of building and developing people, and they're both really complex things. I don't know, commercialism is probably simpler, to be honest, but supporting people. But I think it comes from, for me, it comes from a genuine heart to see people thrive, and to, like, I'm really passionate about people getting ripped off and people not reaching their potential, and so I think that's what really drives me and makes it kind of all worthwhile.
And how do you build these structures out within these organisations that allow you to do that? Is it something like you've set up and run quite a few things yourself? How do you go through a process of winning the support and, you know, creating the space to be able to do these projects? Yeah,
that's an interesting question. I mean, within that context of Roskell Youth Zone, the thing that we had was a building, and my time was paid for. So that's a big part of the overheads that you would generally have to take on. And then on top of that, we had a little programming budget, and we had people like, say, the Ministry of Youth Development or kind of community trusts and stuff that also have little pockets of funding that can add on to it. So I don't know, I think that's what I love about it, is finding ways to be innovative with those little bits and pieces that you do have. And also just like always responding to what the need is from the people you're actually working with. Like the young people, like they're constantly they want some food, or like they want the latest kicks, or, you know, it's real simple stuff that they want. And it breaks your heart to see time and time again that they can't have that, when you think like it's not that far out of reach for them.
And in terms of like creating those roles for people, I guess that the kids seeing you living the entrepreneur's life, like finding pots of funding and coming up with things to do, set an example that they can follow as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's like kind of part of my nature. And in Māori, there's a term called haututu, which is pretty much someone that just touches and plays with everything. Like you just can't keep still, and you always want to figure out how things work or touch everything. And I feel like being a hustler or being an entrepreneur is a little bit like that, and it satisfies that within me, where I can, let's try this and let's try that, and don't worry about how far it's going to go. Like let's just, and I think that was the cool thing about that little testing ground, is it never really had any big, like, you didn't have to get big financial returns. It was the social outcomes that were most important. And even then, within the context of a building, the outcomes were based on how many people were using it. Are people using it? Is it helping the community? So it was really, in that sense, it was really simple to achieve what you needed to achieve. I think now that the difference is it now has to be financially sustainable, the things that we're doing at Te Haa, Manukau and stuff like that. I feel like it's a bigger game now. But the principles are still the same.
Tell me about the driving school, the Puka Te Papa driving school, the buy one, give one model.
Yeah, cool. So PCDS, Puka Te Papa Community Driving School. So that's based in Mount Roskell on Sandringham Road Extension. So over the years that I worked at Auckland Council, and then after I left Auckland Council, I continued to work in this community with the Peter Collective. One of the biggest needs that we saw in that community was people wanting and needing driver's licenses. And there was kind of this kind of understanding within community work that the way that you bring people in was put food on. And food was the thing that would always attract people. We started to get little pockets of funding to help with driver license training just at the learner level, so driver theory. And we saw that was like, it was a bigger pool than food. Like it was consistently oversubscribed. There were long waiting lists. And then we, like as a collaborative or as a collective within Peter Collective, the whole idea with that is that within a community, let's look at how we can work together better to get the outcomes. And so, like I said, driver's licensing came through as a thing that was high priority. And at that time, there was something like 9 different organisations trying to do the same thing, trying to run like learner driver training programs inside what they already do without really being experts in it. But everyone just knew that's what people wanted. So we kind of took a step back and said, let's have a look at overall like why the need is there and what we can do to respond to it in a much better way, because we could see the funding was going to run out soon. It always runs out eventually. Excuse me. So we got those guys together. So my role in that was essentially to bring everyone together and start discussing that and designing a really cool collaborative response to it. And there was one lady her name's Honey, who at that time was the manager of the Migrant Action Trust, and she was all about it. She was like, honestly, like, we need to do a driving school. This is what I think the answer is. And so we kind of just worked that concept together, and we pulled all these different people in. And I remember the most amazing part that happened is we brought everyone together and sat them around the table. We had a guy who ran a education trust, and one of his main education programs was driver's licensing. We had the manager of the local community centre. We had the managers of some local trusts. We had people from Auckland Council. And pretty much what happened is they all sat around the table and explained to each other what their role was and what their need was within driver's licensing. And as they did that, they could all see that if they worked together, they had everything that they needed. So that's how the driving school came through. Then the whole idea of meshing together the social impact. So the demand came mostly from young people and from ethnic women. So that was in Mount Roskill, where those are both huge populations. So by bringing all of those people together, we then had to look at financially how could this be longer term than just the first pocket of funding that we're going to get. So that was when we developed more of a business model behind it, and looking at like driving schools are businesses out there, standalone businesses as they are. So why don't we just look at that model, look at some of the things that have happened around New Zealand and do a bit of a hybrid. So the way that the school works is that the aim is to be a competitive driving school, provide really quality lessons and support for people, and then using some of the money that comes from that to help subsidise others. As part of the program, we have community driving mentors, so people from around the community, including the local police and all those kinds of people, they come in and they do training hours with people. So those are people going from learners to restricted. They need a certain amount of hours and people to help them out on the roads. So we have, I think within the first 12 months, we had like 40 community driving mentors. We trained up a couple of locals that had to have what's called an I endorsement, which means essentially they have the qualification to, they're qualified driving instructors, so they know what they're doing. And then on top of that, there's like in the back, there's a bunch of funding that comes through to help support specific groups. So it might be, here's $10,000 to help ethnic women, or here's $5,000 to help refugee young people and stuff like that. So that kind of helps subsidise in the back end as well. So yeah, it's a little bit complicated, but it's also really, really exciting.
Yeah, and so cool to have built something that's got kind of like a buy one, give one model in it.
Yeah.
Creating jobs and solving like a hole in the community, which is like, how can people get their licenses? And, the absolute traps around fines and fees for people without licenses are a disaster. So a huge thing to have impact on.
Yeah, and not only that, like a lot of the things that we see is, like especially some of the Māori and Pacific young people, sometimes a driving offence is their first touch with the justice system, and it just snowballs from there. So being able to stop that, like just giving them the legal compliance they need to be on the road is really huge. Another big driver was employability. So for some people, they don't have a licence, and that can sometimes be the thing that gets you employed on top of not getting employed. And then around the ethnic woman stuff, like, it's really interesting to see how having a driver's licence and being confident on the road helps them settle in New Zealand and helps them find connection, and also opens up opportunities for them. So it's been super interesting to see the impact of just a simple driver's licence on people's lives.
And also that thinking of creating something sustainable that lasts past the endless funding rounds where you keep going back to the same places and spend more time reporting than doing sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's such a cool thing. And then, like, so with that work with the council and having set these programs up, tell me a little bit about how you came to set up Ngahere Communities.
Yeah, so I spent 5 years working at Auckland Council, and I have quite a creative background. I love photography. I still loved photography. And I personally was getting a little bit frustrated with the 9-to-5 lifestyle, and kind of had enough of the bureaucracy of Auckland Council. I felt it wasn't really my fit. And I felt to me the next step was to finally take the step and step out there and use the skills that I have, like I keep saying, to live the life that I want to live. And that was kind of where I started. And that was where I started Bob and Bob Creative, which essentially is impact storytelling, helping people tell the stories of impact that they're making using today's digital platforms. And so based in South Auckland, started up this business, was working from home alongside one of my best mates, and that was going really well. We started to build that up and got to a point where the new challenges for us was growth. Like, how do we get past this or over this barrier that's like, we need more customers to make more money, to hire more staff, but to have more customers, we need more staff, and we don't have the capital, blah, blah, blah. Like, it was growth. It was classic growth problems. And one of the things I wanted to do was to move out of our office into somewhere else. And looking around South Auckland, there was literally no kind of middle step between working from home and having a full office floor. And that was too big of a jump for us as a small business. And trying to connect in with the different types of business support, it felt super disconnected. You kind of didn't really know where to go for support. And even when you went, it was a little bit like they just sent you somewhere else, or we can't do that for you. So that kind of put me on a little bit of a journey, like, flip, man, if that's what I'm experiencing, that's obviously what other people are experiencing. And I wonder why businesses are not growing, or entrepreneurs are not growing in South Auckland, or the energy seems to be on the city and the North Shore. And I kind of kept my connections with people at Auckland Council, and I had a mentor at Auckland Council as well, and within the Southern Initiative, and kind of just through conversations, I came up with the concept. I started scouting spaces. I found a space and was like, pretty much what I need is about 80K to make this work. So I put together a pitch for services, storytelling services, for $80,000, and I took it in and pitched it and was just pretty much laughed out of the room. Which cracks me up now. I think everyone needs one of those laughed out of the room stories. But it was just a matter of months later that this conversation re-emerged in the form of Te Haa or Manukau. What is Te Haa or Manukau now? So I guess I was drawn into some of the conversations within Auckland Council around what a space like this would look like. I think because I'd been poking and prodding a bit, then TSI then responded to that, and I really take my hat off to them for being really responsive like that. And that's kind of where the conversations began. We went through this process of kind of iterating what could a space look like, where would it be, who are the different partners involved, until the point where Auckland Council had a bit of a concept that they really liked, and then they put it out through what they call a procurement process that we then had to apply through, and then be awarded the opportunity to be the partner within the space.
And part of becoming the partner of running that, it's kind of like a more evolved co-working space, isn't it? Because there's those elements, but there are other kind of community foster, kind of creative, kicking things off, catalysing kind of elements. As part of that process, tell me about the crowdfunding, because you use Te Haa, which is like a different take on crowdfunding, isn't it, in order to tap the community to get the funds to get it going. So even with ATEED and the Southern Initiative and all of these things, there's still that need to go to the community.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the biggest initiative that I'd ever taken on. I think every time I did something, it was bigger and bigger. And so in order for us as Ngahere Communities to take this on, we needed to come, from my calculations, with 150K. And I didn't have, any of that. And so that was then the pursuit of, okay, how are we actually going to practically make this happen from our end? Councils have got their end. They've said what they're going to bring to the table. This is what we need to bring to the table. So we looked at we did take out a business loan for some of it, and then we thought, let's look at this crowdfunding. The timing was perfect, actually. So Takoha is a project by Pledge Me and Māori Women's Development Inc., which is the first Indigenous crowdfunding platform, but it's essentially Pledge Me with a little bit more holistic tikanga behind it. And so we got to be, and through some of my interactions with Barry, who was the financial lead at Pledge Me, he kind of pulled me into the fray a little bit, and the more we discussed it, the more I thought actually this could be a really legitimate way for us to raise a portion of the cash that we needed to get this project up and running. And so that was us. It was a journey. It was a big it's a big project. If you've done crowdfunding before, it's quite a lot of work. It's hardcore sales in one form. You can say it's community building and getting people on board with your vision. It's sales, like it's just a cooler version, I suppose. And for me, sales is never something I've liked. I actually am not that bad at it. I've learned, but I hate salespeople. I hate people that come up to you and try and sell you something. I'm like, get away, get out of my face. But I turned into a salesperson for like 4 weeks, and I hated myself for it by the end of it. But I was actually just talking to the next cohort last night about our experience, and I was saying to them, I'm so proud to say that we have done a successful crowdfunding campaign and that we've been a part of the Tākoha journey. So engaging the community around the concept, around the fact that, like for me, the main narrative for Te Haa or Manukau, or even for Ngahere Communities, is that our Māori and Pasifika people are so overrepresented in the negative statistics, yet I believe we are some of the most creative and entrepreneurial people in the world, the most courageous and adventurous. So what can we do, and how can we start to really draw that out and maximise that and play to those strengths? Mm-hmm. And that's the real driver for me, and what that looks like as a co-working space, but that's kind of more the finer details. And so that was the kind of story that we asked people to come on board with, and we found lots of random ways to allow them to come on board. Anything from like sponsoring a chair. So if you come into our space now, you'll see people's names on chairs and stuff like that. So it was heaps of fun, but it was hard work.
It's kind of bananas that it took that much to get a co-working space going in South Auckland. You know, the biggest part of Auckland.
I know.
It's like the biggest ratepayer base, the biggest part of Auckland, and still it's so, the opportunity is just so unequally spread throughout a city. And, my observations from going to Mount Roskill Grammar for high school for a few years and the like is that the people's parents who were working 3 jobs, it wasn't a lack of hard work. It was a lack of opportunity to do work that actually paid and advanced. And then kids grew up seeing their parents working 3 jobs and getting paid crap and treated like crap, and didn't have a lot of love for the system.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think that's something that I've been battling with, I suppose, through this whole journey that I've been on, is how do you get away from this feeling of it's so unfair to being more proactive about it? And like I said before, like how do you just use what you've got? There's a Māori whakatauki that says he kai kei aku ringa, there's food in my hands. And the whole concept is that everything that you need is within your reach, or it's in your hands, and it might just be in seed form. Like it might be all you have is one little seed, all you have is $100, but you can choose to use that in a way that will drive or move you towards where you want to be. And I think that kind of really underpins kind of my approach to how we can teach some of those entrepreneurial skills to people, whatever age they are, whether they're still children or young people or whether they're older, and to be able to really be, I guess, proud of what you do have and proud of the strengths that you have and the talents that you have, and maximise that, and not continue to be kind of pushed down by the narrative that maybe the media puts on South Auckland or the expectations that people put on each other. So yeah, I'm really passionate about flipping that narrative.
And how's it going? Like, how's the reception been in the community to this new kind of elevated co-working space that you're running?
Yeah, it's been I feel like it's polarising. Like on one hand, things have been incredible. We've done some amazing things. People have been engaging really well. And then on the other hand, there's huge challenges. So it's a real interesting space to live in, like the highs and the lows of any entrepreneurship journey. I feel like it's maybe magnified a little bit more in this context. And so, I mean, one of the things that we've learned, so we opened in September. So we've been open for maybe 7 to 8 months now. One of the things we've learned is that you can look at this 2 ways. You can look at it as a property management opportunity, or you can look at it as a community and capacity building opportunity. And we kind of are looking at both. I've started using this hashtag property with purpose. So there's a side of it where we're like, we just need people in the door that can pay the rent, and help us pay the OPEX. But on the other side, if you fill it up with people that can pay their rent, you're not really fixing anything. You're just creating the same thing again. People with the means can have it. People without the means can't. So that's the kind of conundrum that we find ourselves in on the daily basis. So we've had lots of engagement and we've had lots of people come through, and what we've learned is that I guess the entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystem in South Auckland is at a really, really infant stage. So what we have to do is a whole bunch of work around education, capability building, capacity building, and so we're looking at, I guess, our business model. So Ngahere Communities is a social enterprise, and that in itself is a huge challenge in New Zealand. But we're looking at our business model and thinking, is it best for us to make this sustainable through the commercial avenues, or is it better for us to make it sustainable through the program avenue, where we're actually looking at building this ecosystem and investing in people and investing in programs and investing in opportunities, so that in a couple of years' time, those that have the means are the ones that we actually intend to be in the space, not the ones now like the lawyers and the accountants and all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of our approach in the way that we're looking at it.
Because I imagine it must be such a build, like, the whole startup ecosystem and the whole idea of co-working spaces and accelerators and innovators and stuff, it's really new. It's a really new kind of thing. And when you're going into a place that hasn't physically even had the infrastructure before, to then take people through and teach them on that journey must be from starting from scratch. Do you have to have kind of programs, like accelerator programs, to take people with the spark and help teach them?
Yeah, I think you do. But I mean, and this is not a sustainable approach or anything, but I think for me, and this comes from the way that I was brought up, and I think the tikanga Māori that's within me, and I think that it ultimately comes with relationship. It comes with like a willingness to walk a journey alongside a person, and I learned that from working at Roscoe Youth Zone. Like you can have a person there and you can go, here's a lawnmower, go make some money, but they're still going to go, what do I do with it? How do I make money? How do I present myself? How do I blah, blah, blah. Like there's the capability and the capacity and the education that they don't have that a lot of people might take for granted. The networks and the access to people that might give them a hand up or give them an opportunity, like that doesn't exist for a lot of people. People are not growing up in families where dad ran a business or uncle ran a business, or people are growing up in families where you work in a factory, you work 3 jobs, you do that. People are hardworking, but the skills you need for entrepreneurship they still seem like a newer skill set or a different skill set that doesn't exist in abundance yet.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because one of the, part of the whole kind of like startup thing is this fetishization of like, fail fast. Like you can fail if you are comfortable and you have the means to come back and you have access to more capital and support. You can't fail if you've got everything on the line and you don't have a network to kind of tap. And so capital, which is such a part of the startup world, it runs in networks.
Absolutely. And I think again, I keep coming back to just look at what you got. What have you got and start from there. And it's almost like a repetition. We've got a building and we've got a bunch of staff. We've got a really cool network now. The fact that it's driven by the Southern Initiative, which is Auckland Council, and driven by or supported by AT and Grid AKL. Even that, that's really huge. It's really cool to have that support. And then for us, we bring in our own networks within South Auckland, our own relationships. We can see the opportunities. We're trying our best to lead the way and make a pathway for people to follow. And then to use, I guess, what we have within the building to say, here's a space, come and try some stuff. It's a bit safer. There's not a lot of, like I said, we're trying to look at how we can use the program side to fund the commercial side. So some of the new things we're looking at is just setting up a bunch of studios, having a space just say this. We're a bunch of creative storytellers, people that love to talk or people that like to share what's going on. Let's just remove that barrier. Here's some access to some stuff, because I would say a good 100K in this room alone and just equipment that people were not going to have access to yet. If they had access to, I'm pretty sure some amazing stuff's going to come out of the creative capital that exists in South Auckland. So I think just being really practical on how we can I'm really frustrated with all the programs that have, this is the entry point. You must look like this, you enter here, you go through this process, and then you pop out here and you look like that. I just feel like that's not the right approach. I feel like you need to, and entrepreneurship is all over the place, but you need to just provide space for people to just do and be and fail, but in an environment that's not going to ruin them. Yeah, like I guess you just said.
What have some of the highlights been since you've opened?
Oh, there's so many highlights. We had a couple of cool, like, we managed to, this is super shallow but super cool, we managed to meet Prince Harry. We took a bunch of young people to meet. So he was going to meet young people, and I'm not young anymore, but I managed to squeeze my way in there. So that was really cool. And the cool thing is when we met Prince Harry, Jacinda Ardern was with him as well, and so we managed to chat to her, and she made this kind of promise. I don't know if she meant it or what, but she said, I'm going to come out and visit you guys. And so the next week I was straight on email. I was like, hi Jacinda, remember me? And invited her to come out to an event that we'd just started called Ngahere Talks. And it took like a couple of months, but they finally got back and was like, yes, love to come. Here's the date that she's available. And so that was really awesome. So we managed to host her on the 1st of March this year, and have a really cool conversation around creative futures. And we chose to focus on the fact that she's also the Minister of Arts, Culture and Heritage, and I guess kind of push her buttons a little bit around what the government's doing around the creative capital that exists in South Auckland. So that was really cool. So Ngahere Talks has been a really fun project for us to do. Some of the other highlights, I'm trying to think. We ran just before Christmas last year, we ran a pop-up store in our space in Manukau. And that was a really cool experience to look at who are the entrepreneurs that are in Manukau right now that are product-based. So they have some products they're either making or reselling within South Auckland. And we touched base with about 40, which was really cool to see. They weren't all in South Auckland, but a majority, I'd say 80%. And out of that, about 21 of them decided to put their products in the store. So we ran a store for 7 days. And the 7 days we brought in about 9K, which was a pretty cool outcome for us. And that, like, just that in and of itself was like kind of pulling out from within the community, like who's out there, who's doing some stuff, what can we do together to see how we can kind of, like you're trying to sell stuff at a market stall or through your Facebook page or whatever, but what will happen if we kind of pull everyone's products and go from there. So that was really cool, and that's kind of given us some really awesome insights around how we can use the space moving forward as well, what ways we can add value to entrepreneurs that are out there through a physical space in a really cool location. Yeah, there's been heaps more highlights.
And a couple of questions that we ask everyone on the podcast. One is like, along the way, like you've made a whole lot of things in places that aren't typically that easy to make kind of entrepreneurial things happening. Like bureaucracies are great, but they're not the easiest place for nimble kind of entrepreneurship. Like along the way, like has it been hard on you? Like have people told you you're crazy to try? Like how do you keep going?
I thought about this and I was like, no one's told me to my face. It doesn't mean they haven't said it. I think you definitely come up against the tall poppy syndrome though, all the time. And I feel like I kind of came to this understanding a while ago that a really good KPI of success is how many haters you got. Because as soon as you're like visible enough for people to hate on you, then it means you're doing something that is either pushing their buttons or catching their attention. And so I feel like that's a part of the journey, and you have those people. And it's really interesting. Like sometimes they come from places you don't expect, but it's got to be like water off a duck's back. You just got to keep going. And I think for me, the driver has never been to be rich or to make a lot of money, or if anything, it might just be my own kind of selfish ambition to just try lots of things and and a little bit of an addiction to just starting things and activating on ideas. But I don't know, it seems to be working. I think it's the more you do it, the more you learn. Learning how to work the system is really important as well, I think. Like I said before, I think perspective is really important. How you see constraints or opportunities really determines how you can actually work them and how you can respond to them. And, like there's loads of opportunities out there. I think of one example where the Ministry of Youth Development gave us $10,000 to support the something like they call like youth voice, like what do young people want in that community. And we just took that $10,000 and set up a screen printing business. And they were stoked because there's all these kids. I think one of the things we did to make them super happy is Wizzy Intermediate School, which is right next door, Decile 1 school, they couldn't afford PE uniforms. What we did is we got the kids that ran a competition. The kids all designed their logo for their house name. They have really cool house names as well. And then every single kid, they had to bring their own T-shirt, but we brought them through the screen printing thing and they all printed their own PE uniform. And that was really cool. So that keeps like Ministry of Youth Development happy. And now we've got all the equipment and the setup we need to be like to keep the program going. So I think, yeah, you gotta be a hustler. You gotta be creative. You gotta be resourceful. Yeah.
And aside from like your example, like what advice do you give to kids or young people or anyone who's wanting to kind of like make something new happen?
What advice do I give to them? I mean, I think one of the things about me that I know is I like to encourage people and I really like to believe in the best in them. Sometimes I can push it too far, but I think that's what I do. I just choose to see them for who they can be and try and kind of, in a sense, draw that out in them, like, or say that to them so that they start to believe it and help them understand that the quirky things about them are not negatives. The natural tendencies they have are not embarrassing. They're actually the way you're wired and they're the secret to your success. So I think that's the thing that is my main encouragement to them.
And as a final thought, how do you define success? Like what would be the time for you to stop making things happen? Like when would you what's success for you?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. I think for me success is just like I find that it comes in being really comfortable in who you are. And that can look lots of different ways for different people. But I think for my journey, I feel super successful now, even though these seemingly insurmountable mountains in front of me, because I'm doing what I love. I'm using the skills that I have. I'm challenging myself on the daily. I'm trying to get better at the things I'm not that good at and better at the things I am good at. I'm helping people. I feel like my grandparents would be proud of what I do. Like those are the things I think to me that help me feel successful. And one day I hope that will turn into like a nice big house and lots of holidays overseas. But I think that can come in different ways as well. Yeah.
That's so cool. Thank you so much, Manawa Udy, for joining us to talk about the journey with Ngahere Communities and Te Haa or Manukau. Thank you so much for joining us.
No worries. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you so much, Tina Tiller, for producing, and thank you very much for having us along and listening. Cheers.
Awesome.
You've been listening to Business is Boring, presented by Simon Pound. And brought to you by The Spin-Off and Callaghan Innovation.
From the Spin-Off Podcast Network, that was Business is Boring, brought to you by SparkLab. Make sure you're following Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information on SparkLab, visit sparklab.co.nz. Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today. The Spin-Off Podcast Network.